is the XR Motion Podcast with your hosts, Michael Steinberg and Andrew Hogue.
All right. Welcome to the XR Motion Show, where we go over everything 3D, VR, AR, metaverse, NFTs. I mean, hey, crypto is popping off. We could be seeing some NFTs coming back. But anyway, you name it, we go over it. Today, we have a very fun episode. I'm very excited about it. But before we bring on our guest, we have the world's greatest co-host, Andrew. How's it going, man?
What's up, man? I'm super excited for the episode as always, but I also want to call out. It does sort of feel like 2020 again, right? With like crypto popping off. I'm like, dude, NFTs, they're going to be back. I just have a feeling. I don't know. I wasn't in the game last time, probably won't be in the game this time, but it's still nice to be on the sidelines and seeing it all kind of run the course again. So,
dude, I can't agree more. I'm surprised there hasn't been too much NFT news yet. I'm like,
yeah.
Man, crypto is just exploding. And yeah, but we won't go into that because dear God, we're not going to be that podcast. So but that being said, we have an amazing guest here. Alon, how's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
Good, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It's a real honor.
Dude, I'm amped for this. What we're going to be talking about. I'm sure everyone's going to get some great knowledge here. Can you just describe yourself, a little bit about what you do for anybody who doesn't know?
Sure. My name is Alon Hammer. I'm Rem, is my AKA. I am predominantly a visual artist, a VJ, projection mapping specialist. And in the past about 5 years, I shifted gears to be more into the virtual production sphere, where I'm a virtual production supervisor, consultant, engineer, designer, VAD, if anybody knows the term, virtual art department designer, I guess VAD is the thing, VAD artist, I guess. And more recently, I started working for a company called Magic Box, which is a mobile virtual production solution for virtual production.
Jack of all trades. I love it. I love it. So that's awesome. So what kind of, I guess, can you just describe a little bit about what virtual production is, just a little bit more in detail?
Sure. Virtual production, I would say, is kind of like when you have, like when you're shooting in some sort of virtual environment. Maybe it's a green screen, maybe it's an LED volume, maybe it's just an empty room, and you're doing things that are virtual in the physical world or marrying the two together. So an example would be Gollum in Lord of the Rings is a fully virtual character that was filmed inside of an empty room or on location when they were shooting in New Zealand, and he was covered in, markers for motion capture, but on site, or on the set, I should say, they had some sort of pre-visualization, a virtual avatar that could kind of give them a little bit more understanding of where Gollum was and what he was looking like. Let's move forward now to like something like The Mandalorian, where they're shooting the whole thing inside of a very big virtual production volume, an LED volume. So it's, imagine like big, massive TV screen all the way around, biggest TV screen you've ever seen, all the way around. And that allows them to basically shoot what we call in-camera VFX, which basically allows them to not have to do post-production VFX. Although, massive caveat there, they still end up doing post-production VFX. They're just, unfortunately, especially with The Mandalorian, since it's such a big budget production and they can afford to do that. Nowadays, there's a lot more kind of like intermediary things that allow you to do both. But where the benefit of, for instance, shooting on LED volume for The Mandalorian comes in is where all the reflections. So, Mando is metal. All the spaceships are metal. If they would have shot that in a traditional green screen or blue screen, then they would have all those reflections. And so that's kind of where LEDs took off. There is, I kind of skipped ahead, I guess, a little bit. Like you have movies like Avatar, which are shot completely in a blue screen studio, where you have a mixture of physical and virtual characters, but it's still virtual production, where Again, the director has a virtual camera. He's moving around a virtual camera inside of a volume. You have actors that have full costume. You have actors that have motion capture suits, and everything is blue screen. So then inside the virtual camera, the director is seeing, motion tracked characters. He's seeing the environment, or she's seeing the environment, and again, they're seeing the physical person. So it's kind of like a way to it's a blanket term, I should say. It's a blanket term for pre-visualizing in camera, either final picture, final pixel VFX, or pre-visualization VFX.
Right. That's such a, I mean, such a like impactful space to work into, because I feel like for the longest time, directors, people on sets, it's like I always think about, I think it was like The Hobbit, and it was like Ian McClellan complained about how he's like, I don't want to act against a tennis ball, like
Right.
using the tennis ball for eye line or whatever. So
Right.
like bridging that gap is, I mean, it's bringing out some of the most insane. I mean, even all the movies you've just brought up. I think about The Sphere too. Like I just saw someone
Totally.
posted some Grateful Dead concert visuals in The Sphere, and it's just like, wow, dude, this is all taking things to a whole different level. In an industry that's like for years has always been doing VFX, 3D, all of that.
Totally.
So
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the
um,
Rings is like 20, 30 years old
I
almost,
know
right?
it's actually
25
funny you
years
said
old.
the Gollum thing. I just had to do the math, and I'm like, I used to think all this stuff is like cutting edge, but I guess people were doing it like,
There's been a
It was
massive
cutting edge for
shift.
its time, though.
Oh,
yeah,
back then, I mean, that was cutting
huge.
edge,
Andy
Yeah.
like
Serkis's performance, all of it. I mean, it was just
totally. Imagine in like the late 90s or early thousands having like video game quality, like responsive kind of like character in a viewport,
right.
that's crazy.
So I wanted to
Um
ask, speaking of that, what, for anybody who doesn't know, and actually you might know better than I do, or enlighten me with some information, but what software is primarily being used for this, and maybe what are you specifically using?
That's a great question. I am very fringy when it comes to the softwares that I use for virtual production. Obviously, Unreal Engine is kind of like the go-to, render engine. So it's kind of like the thing that's rendering the virtual environments. ILM have their own proprietary rendering system. Currently, there's a bunch of other ones. V-Ray is coming out with one as well, called Chaos Arena. So that's kind of like where the actual content is being rendered, where the virtual environments are being rendered. And then because it's such a vast system, there's camera tracking, there's LED walls, there's content, there's virtual lighting, there's DMX controlling the physical lighting, there's if you're doing like set extension, you have to do like front plate and back plate and compositing. So there's a lot of different things involved. So many people use disguise. I'm a very anti-disguise person. Well, I won't be negative. I just don't like their price point or their closed system. Nothing against Disguise or the people that make Disguise. People use Pixera, which is also a very nice system. I personally built my own system in TouchDesigner. So I use TouchDesigner as the environment, and inside of the environment, I built like a custom UI UX that the goal is that anybody can use it. Right now, I'm using it as the operator, but the goal is that we can eventually hire anybody and teach them how to use it. My CEO can use it, so if he wants to be in the truck with the client, they can, hold like a little iPad, and they have all the controls and everything. And it also allows me to be very malleable and dynamic and procedural with what I'm doing. So, a lot of things that we've been doing recently is, and I'm sure we'll have seen what the magic box is by this point in the edit, but we can fit a car in there. So a lot of things that we're doing now is car process. And car process, interestingly enough, is not using any virtual. It can use virtual environments, but traditionally we use driving plates, which is almost like a 360 kind of array of cameras on a car that drives down the road, and then those 360 images are projected onto the LED volume. So it's not virtual production as it would be with Unreal, but it is virtual production because it's extremely immersive. And the person inside of the car feels like they're in some sort of real environment. And apropos to what you were saying before, Andrew, about how far this goes back, you could consider something like rear projection like they did in James Bond, or more recently in Birdman, in Birdman, to be virtual production, which is when they just would project an image on a screen, with a projector. That technically is not virtual production, but it technically is virtual production. Like maybe back then it wouldn't have been considered, but today it would be. So the fact that I use Touch Designer, it gives me the ability to be dynamic. Whether I need to switch between a driving plate setup or an Unreal setup, or maybe it's just classic content on the wall, motion graphic style. I know you guys love that. Um, and Touch Designer allows me to be very flexible with that. Besides for being infinitely cheaper than a disguise system, especially what we would need to operate. We have four, $30,000 servers in our truck. If
Wow.
those were disguise servers, they would be a lot more.
A much more
Um,
expensive version.
Much more
Yeah.
expensive for the same thing. Or I don't want to say the same thing, for a similar thing. Touch Designer allows me to rapidly prototype things. So if the operator, the CEO, whoever is in the truck and wants a new button, I can add a new button in a few minutes. If I want to be able to, let's say, control the Helios megapixel LED controllers, which is our LED controllers, I can quickly write up a JSON script that will, talk to it through HTTP in the matter of a few minutes. So it's
Yeah.
extremely malleable in the sense of prototyping, but Touch Designer is pretty cool because it's kind of like the prototype thing that you're making is actually like a final product. So it's like, it doesn't look very pretty in the UI, but it works the way you would want it to work, and it's stable. So it's a kind of interesting place where it's like a sandbox, but it's also like the thing that you're making in the sandbox is like ready to go.
Right. So, one, I love all of that. I also am a huge, proponent of, I see so much in this industry going towards, concepts of proceduralism, interactive, like you're talking about building essentially user interfaces for people who are interacting, with this custom solution in Touch Designer. Before we get into more about Magic Box, I would love to hear from you just about your background prior to any of this. It sounds like you have some coding skills, sounds like you have some visual skills, an amalgamation of all these different things coming together to make what is sounding like a pretty incredible place to be working in. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and just what
Sure.
led you to kind of building these things in Touch Designer?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. Well, I was thinking about this earlier when I was taking a shower prior to the getting ready for the podcast, and I was thinking, XR, what can I talk about? And one of my earliest, like, I've always been kind of a nerd and like really into computers. I built my first computer in like a shoebox, and I'm not that old, but my first computer was, not like an Amiga. It was Windows, I think 95 or something like that. But you know, I was thinking about that, and like the first one of the first things I can remember that I made content wise was like this. I got really nerdy. I got really into like After Effects and Premiere, and like how do I play with these things. Video Copilot was obviously very big back then, and I was kind of like figuring out what I want to do with it, because the motion graphics aspect was fun for me, but I really liked like filming. So the first that I made was like this intro with like graphics from like Video Copilot. Maybe it was pre-Saber, but it was like this very basic, like, words flashing on the screen. And then me standing in my living room jumping in the air, and then I rotoscoped myself and made myself fly and broke the ceiling, like
Hell
a
yeah.
like a really kid
Brilliant.
version.
Classic. This is
Brilliant.
this is classic. I've watched a lot of Andrew Kramer tutorials, and I'm ready to do my own. And you're just like, all right,
Exactly.
I gotta like burst through a ceiling, or like,
Exactly.
camera flies through some glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And it
awesome.
was like, 12-year-old me, and I'm like, this actually looks good. Like I'm surprised, obviously it was like garbage, but I was surprised by the ease of what am I trying to, like, I was surprised by how easy it was for me to make something that looked decent. So that was like one of my earliest memories of like making content like in that kind of matter. And then it kind of went from there. It went to like getting really big into video editing. I was a video editor for many years. Eventually started making my own movies and became a filmmaker. Went to film school. During film school, And before film school, I was very big into the psytrance scene. I'm originally from Israel, and in Israel, psytrance is like, maybe what bass music is here, or EDM what is here. Um, and in the psytrance scene, not in Israel yet, but in Europe, where I would start going pretty fast, visuals and projection mapping is massive. So I kind of had that in my mind. And in art and film school, which is kind of like an art school, I just started getting more into video art as like a thing. It was like kind of like available to me. There was a projector. People were doing installations. People were doing exhibitions. I was like, okay, well, I've seen this way better than this boring, art contemporary thing that you're doing. I know what they're doing in like Modem Festival and things like that. So I kind of very quickly was like, okay, I really like this. I had a very easy in the psytrance world because I was promoting parties for many years, so I kind of knew the whole scene and everybody in it. And very fast, I kind of like started myself a career. I definitely want to shout out my mentor, Dorian Masterdamus, who was a huge influence on me, gave me my first gig, elevated me. And from there, it was kind of just like a love story. I just really fell in love with projection mapping. I fell in love with content creation, but you know, outside of the film industry or the film kind of art form. Uh, my first love for film was this need to want to like tell a story, and then it became this need to solve problems like a director. A director is always solving problems. It's like you have your original thing, and then an actor has a problem, the art director has a problem. People always have problems, and you're kind of like solving everybody's problems. And then it shifted to, okay, well, now I'm directing my own show, and I have to solve the projector problem and the projection mapping problem, and I need to make the content, and the problem solving kind of changed and evolved. And then I kind of discovered, I've told this story so many times by now, but I've discovered TouchDesigner in Rome at LPM, which is a festival in Rome. Shout out to Aureli, Alina Anka, and Danny Bega, who kind of were just two nerds on a computer that I kind of saw them and was like, oh, that looks cool. What is that? Got really infatuated by TouchDesigner. And then I kind of came back around in a circle because real time, especially when I started getting into 3D, which is more like Notch and Unreal, is kind of like filmmaking. You kind of can have a character, you can play with lighting, you can tell a story again. So I started getting back into like storytelling, but in my own kind of work, in my own kind of environment, or my own kind of little world. I think filmmaking burnt me out a little bit because there's a huge timeline where it's like you come up with an idea, you write a script, and then it might not be a year until you see your final movie. um, and with VJing and projection mapping, it's instant. You get instant gratification from the audience, you get instant gratification from your product. And then when you add to that real time, it's not only instant like gratification from the artwork, it's also like an instant reactivity. There's like a very, very obvious reaction from the audio, from your controller, from the scene. So that was kind of like where I ended up in my visuals, where I do generative real time 3D visuals. And lucky enough, or I should say, maybe, I don't know, lucky enough, when COVID hit, all the clients I had in the corporate theater world, you see, as you start getting better at your skills as a VJ, you start getting hired by corporate theater because that's what they want, is the cool shit from the festivals. And I'm like a really good operator because I can operate under stress and in festivals. So I can obviously operate in a corporate theater environment where there's a lot, or the stress is different, I should say. So during COVID, all those clients shifted to virtual production because that's
Yeah.
kind of what was going on. There was no events. And because of my knowledge in Unreal Engine and Notch, the shift to that was very easy. It was very, simple, and kind of just, it made sense. And I also went back to my film, my film days of like being on a set, which was just like, that blew my mind when I came to California like 5 years ago and was on like this huge set. I'm like, how the hell did I end up back on a film set with all
Yeah.
these different skills that I've got over the past 10 years?
That's so real. I mean, especially the COVID piece. It's like, I mean, obviously uh, watershed event or whatever you want to call it for a lot of reasons. But I also specifically remember how quickly all of a sudden it was like, shit, everyone needs to learn Unreal because everything's
Yeah,
going virtual. And
for
like,
sure.
so to be prepared at that moment must have been, pretty exciting.
It was, and it was really like there was like a really big element of like my roots, where it was like, okay, I'm doing all these cool abstract things. I'm like learning how to make my abstract art more storytelling. Like I'm adding characters, I'm adding lighting, and it's like it's going from like pretty shapes and pretty colors to like some story. Obviously, it's still very abstract in terms of visuals. And then all of a sudden, I'm being like, okay, can you design a set? Can you design an environment? And it's like, oh, now I'm like, coming back to this kind of like film esque kind of eye where you have to think about the lighting, you have to think about the camera angles. And it was a very nice feeling. Um, Funnily enough, like as that was happening, because of my knowledge in touch designer and my understanding of like engineering or like systems engineering. I'm not a coder by any stretch. I only got into code. I'm like a GPT coder, because
Hell
I
yeah.
know touch designer and I can do node based scripting and node based coding. It was a very easy shift for me.
Yeah.
um,
You already
but
had the
back
design thinking,
design
designing
thinking,
system
procedural understanding of like
for sure. Yeah.
left to right instead of up to down. It's kind of the same thing. Modules, connections, parameters. But because I had this kind of very extensive knowledge with systems and this experience in film, I started getting hired as like a supervisor and engineer. So I
Yeah.
started building studios and getting hired to build studios. Um, and that was like kind of like, okay, now I'm going away from being an artist and I'm going much more into like being a designer or software, a tech artist or a software designer or something like that. um and the first 2 years were kind of hard because on one hand I was making a lot of money and like being very successful in this, and it was felt good. You're building a studio and then that studio's being used to do productions. It's pretty cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'm not doing my art anymore. I'm only VJing like once a year in the summer. And then it kind of hit me that like, am I depressed? Am I feeling is something missing in my life right now? And I'm like, no, I'm actually really happy. And like my creative itch is being itched in a different way. And like
Yeah.
my problem solving skills of problem solving, like making art or, solving this thing was being itched in making these systems. And it
Yeah.
was a very big realization because I think a lot of us, you know, being an artist is such a loose term and such a blanket term. And it's really, I was always in the school of like everybody's an artist, but
Right.
me myself, I'm a real artist,
Sure.
like, or I'm a
Yeah.
visual artist or something. And it was kind of like this realization that it's a very, there is no right way to do it. If you're scratching the creative itch in some way, that's what matters. It doesn't matter your title or what you're doing as what your output is. If the output that you're doing is scratching the creative itch that you're seeking to fulfill by being an artist, then that's totally fine.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree with that. I've had a very similar journey with the concept of creativity, and I talk to people all the time now where I'm like, people. I talk to people in sales roles, and they're like, "Well, I don't have a creative job." I'm like, "Dude, if your job is to like show up and solve problems and come up with solutions that other people don't have, you're doing creative. I mean, that's creative work. It's. I think it's easy to get caught up thinking like if I'm not shooting a movie or if I'm not working on that short film that I want to do or but yeah, that's an amazing. You kind of sound like you've landed in the perfect spot given all of your experience, and like it's pretty rare, I think, to have all those experiences working together. Which ultimately leads me to ask a little bit about where you are now, which
One
is
more
Yeah.
thing that
this.
one
Yeah,
more
yeah,
thing that is
absolutely.
popping in my head just before we move on is that because I'm sure you guys know this as well. There's like this kind of like the moment your vocation becomes your job, right? All of a sudden, the thing that you love doing is now paying your bills, and it's a little bit of a rat race, and you're kind of chasing your tail the whole time. And then you're like, well, when I sit down and like make something creative, it looks like shit, or I don't feel good about it, and all my creative output is being done in design or whatever. When I started shifting to the more technical side, my output of my quote unquote art was way different. Was It felt better. I don't know if it's better or worse, but it felt better. I'm lucky because I do get to perform. If I didn't have that outlet, maybe I would feel differently about the whole thing. But when I do go and VJ, and I have that opportunity to like focus my creative energy, it feels so much better that I'm not doing it as like just as a job.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Removing any yeah, it's kind of it's sort of a catch 22, right? Because like removing financial incentive, especially when you're early on in your career, can be really difficult because
Totally.
everyone's got bills to pay. At a certain
Yeah.
point, you kind of need the incentive, and then you sort of end up slingshotting back and being like, actually removing that incentive, kind of changes the way you approach the work. And when other needs are met, it's much easier to kind of find your flow in that way.
I think so. And it's obviously it's not one size fits all. I think there's definitely a lot of ways to do it, but if you're in a moment where you're discouraged by not doing the work that you love to do, find the time to still do it outside of the work, and maybe you'll still be in love with it and still find like something that connects you to it.
Yeah, I always feel whenever I get my creative or I have to scratch my creative itch, it's always a huge buildup of a bubble. And you'll see me post this probably once a year and I go, I'm doing dailies, damn it. I've done that probably
I
six
I
or
can
seven times,
I can definitely attest to
I'm
that, dude.
like,
I think I mean, it's always impressive though. I mean, it's all,
yeah. I usually get a
that's
few weeks,
I'm doing
I think
dailies.
that's the
Yeah.
thing is, who
Just
was I
like,
just,
yeah.
I think I was just listening to a, oh shit, it was a Ethan Hawke interview.
Hmm.
And that guy, he's like, he gives interviews. I'll say that. Uh, Agree or disagree, the man can definitely talk in an interview. He had actually really a good quote that was sort of like, it's like the realization that creativity, this idea, it's like it's an ongoing process. It's constantly evolving, and if it's the second that you fall in love with the end result is the second that you stop loving doing
Wow.
the
Yeah,
work.
that's it.
And
That's exactly it. Yeah.
it's so like as long as you're regularly revisiting your motivations and checking in and enjoying the process, yeah, I mean, whatever that looks like, but don't get hung up too much on the
And
end
the
result,
and the end
because
result.
yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, you finish it and then what? It's like why Olympians that win gold medals, they're just like depressed as hell afterwards because they're like, shit, well, I just, great, I did it, and then you're like, is that my peak? Like, what do I do next? So, yeah, really good perspectives on creativity there. But yeah, so I did want to ask a little bit about where you are right now, because I looked at Magic Box before we got on, and like this is the stuff that I think gets buy-in pretty easily from people. And a lot of times I have a hard time describing some of these technologies to people that maybe aren't in the space. You can show them some of the Magic Box stuff, and then they're like, okay, I get it. So if you want to just chat a little bit about
Sure.
what Magic Box is, what your role is, which you've touched on a little bit, and just yeah, some of the projects that you're working on with them.
Sure. So Magic Box is a company that started, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 years ago, right as COVID started, by a very nice man called Brian Novak, out of San Francisco. And originally, it was kind of a LED stage. So think, concerts. Think, corporate theater as well, or like a some sort of product launch or whatever. It was kind of like a truck that pulls up, transforms into a big LED stage, basically, with a stage as well. Um, and he opened it up during COVID, worst time to do that, obviously. And then he shifted and made a second truck that was kind of like the same thing but focused on virtual production. It was enclosed. It had much better quality LED panels. It had much more state of the art kind of servers, and it yeah, being enclosed was like a big part of it. And he released that during the writer's strike. So, he kind of like this kind of like up and down thing. Um, Now, I got into Magic Box late 2023, almost a year ago now, where over a year ago now, actually, they did a show for Netflix. And this is kind of where the Magic Box is very interesting, because it's not just LED volume; it can also be used as kind of like a immersive, interactive brand activation. So the movie was Rebel Moon, not a good movie. Don't recommend it. Um, but the idea for the Rebel Moon movie, because Zack Snyder is such a heartthrob kind of like nerd sphere kind of guy, he's like a character. They did like a tour around Comic Cons, and we did what's the con with like the shoes and all the
Oh, they have a con for everything, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a drip con or some shit like that, you
Right.
know.
True.
Some con, I don't know, it was ridiculous. And then all the premieres, and basically the idea was that people can come to the premiere, to these conventions, get dressed up in the costumes, get a prop, walk into a virtual production studio, get shot on a volume with like, you know, with parts of the props and art, and you know, the art department stuff, set design, um, and then get edited into a trailer, and that trailer gets sent to you on your phone within a few
Dude,
minutes.
that's awesome.
Super smart brand activation, you know, because it's like very viral, and like you share the trailer with you in it, but like
Right.
90% of the trailer is the actual trailer, and the 10% is like of you being like, you know, very stoic standing there. But it's like getting the trailer out there. So it's a very smart activation. And we did 4 locations. We did, or 3 locations. We did this convention, I guess 4. We did the Burbank studio where it was shot, where like we did the first like initial thing for the internal Netflix. And then we did Mexico City, where they did the premiere, the Mexican premiere of the movie. And then we did you know, Hollywood Boulevard, where they did the American premiere of the movie, and this convention that I was talking about. So, you know, and all with the same truck, you know.
Wow.
So this was like
So
a 4.
you drove the truck out
I
to
didn't drive the
Mexico.
truck. No, we
But
we
like,
got
but
drivers.
someone drove the truck. Yeah,
Someone
of
drove
course,
the
yeah.
truck. Someone drove
God,
the
dude, I
truck.
don't even want to know what the gas is like. That's got to be just like
It's a
insane.
I wouldn't
yeah.
want to be responsible. That's like driving a Lamborghini with how much
Well,
equipment you got.
They
Like 50 Lambos. I don't know, dude. I
so
feel like
they
that's gotta
actually
be...
they had 2 armed guard cars driving with them the whole time,
Yeah,
and they
for
wrapped the
sure.
truck with like fake product to like make it seem like it's not what it is, so
Right.
that, you know, nobody tried to rob it, because it is like, you know, a few $1,000,000 in a
Easily. Yeah,
truck.
that
Wow.
was actually going to be one of my questions is are you allowed to share the number? But I mean, I would
Yeah,
imagine
it's a few mil. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you know, this is
insane.
the first version. The second version will cost less because we've learned a lot. But the mechanics, the equipment, the, you know, all the hydraulics and everything, it's very, very expensive. So yeah, I mean, you'd think that, yeah, this is very expensive, and it's like, you know, maybe not affordable, but the beauty of it is that the alternative, right, would be to erect an LED volume in somewhere in the middle of Mexico City, in the street somewhere, which would take, you know, a few days. Calibrate all the virtual production stuff. So calibrate the camera, calibrate the LEDs, calibrate the systems, which would take another few days. Maybe you could do it all at once, maybe 3 or 4 days. So now you're paying, you know, 10, 15 people, 3 or 4 days
Yeah.
labor. Then you have to strike it, right? And then before you even strike, when you get to the actual production, maybe it doesn't look as good as you paid for. You know, you paid the highest amount of money for the best, you know, for me, right? A really good, for me, the best supervisor you can get. And you got the best LED panels, and you got the best, you know, LED technician. But in reality, you know, you get there, the ground's not straight, you know, whatever, the power's not good enough, the servers didn't come proper enough, I'm too drunk to do my job, or whatever it is. I'm joking. But you know, so it's very hard to get the quality if it's not a turnkey solution. And
Mm.
Magic Box is a turnkey solution, but it's not just a turnkey solution, it's also like mobile. So when we pull up, within 45 minutes, we transform into a ready to use studio.
Wow.
And
It's
it
amazing.
takes us 45 minutes to strike as well. So
Yeah.
the cost of the transportation of the truck um, is almost you know, minuscule compared to what it costs to actually build this. And we've seen this again and again when we get quotes in, you know, there is like a fine line, obviously, but the day rate for the truck is very affordable. I won't
Yeah.
just say it out loud here, but if you want quotes, just please let me know, and we can, you know, give you one right away. It's way more affordable than you would imagine, and almost a like an eighth to maybe a tenth of the price of what the same thing costs to erect per
Which
day.
is so huge because I think like we talk about this a lot within our community, and it's that's why I'm so fascinated by the Magic Box project. And you see more of this happening, but and it's true of any product, but like it's like an accessibility issue for many people, even artists that
100%.
want to experiment and work with this kind of technology. It's like, you can go way
100%.
smaller, and it's like not everyone can afford a $1,000 headset or like whatever
Yep.
the Apple Vision Pro costs. Not
Yep.
everyone can afford a projector to do projection mapping. That doesn't mean that people and artists wouldn't be skilled or talented or enjoy doing it. I think there's like such a barrier to entry, and it usually is cost. And then, in the case of Magic Box, you're also meeting, I have friends that work at streaming services in marketing, and they're doing activations and they want to do this cool stuff, but they don't have the budgets or they don't have the
100%.
experience doing it. So it's you're hitting so many like awesome points with the
I
fact that it's mobile, the fact that it's cheaper, it's so innovative.
the
Yeah.
reason sorry, go Mike.
Well, I just want to say two things. I almost feel that the Magic Box has to be the car needs to be in the shape of a box, and it needs to say Magic on it. I don't know why. I'm just that way when you see it, you're like, oh, it's the Magic.
It does.
Box.
It says Magic Box on it.
Oh, I love it. I
And
love
it's-
it. And the second thing I wanted to ask is, so what is, if you can describe a maybe clientele story, or maybe what something along those lines. I'm not sure what you can or can't disclose, but
Yeah. Well, so I was gonna say that, like, because what Andrew's talking about, the accessibility, and I'll tie that into a client story, is that's the reason I took the job. I've been a freelancer my whole life, and when I was on this Netflix gig for 4 months with Brian, the whole time, he's like, I want to hire you full time. Like, nah, I don't do full time. You can hire me freelance. I'll do freelance. And then I slowly realized like what his vision was and what the idea of the Magic Box was, which is accessibility. Now, obviously, it's still a high bar to entry, but compared to what is available for the height of quality, for the type of quality, it's super affordable. At around the same time, I was working on a product. I was working on a software solution to kind of make virtual production accessible to everybody. And since then, I've kind of married the two together, where the Magic Box in its current solution can essentially be operated by almost anybody because of the way that we've built the UI, because of the way, it's a very press this first, press this second, press this third, boom, it's all on. And that's something that's really important to us as a company, and where we're going in the future as well, to be more accessible, to allow things to be easier to use, and to reach the people that wouldn't be able to access these things that maybe they should. Um, in terms of client stuff, I mean, I guess most recently we did like a bunch of stuff for we've done a lot of like TV driving plate stuff. So we did a few car commercials, and then we started doing like car process for like TV shows. We did 911, that show. It's like a procedural drama show. I never heard about it before, but supposedly it's very big. We did this show called High Potential, which is with shit, I can't remember her real name, but Dee Reynolds from It's Always
Oh,
Sunny in
right.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
What's her
Oh,
what's her
wow.
name? It's embarrassing. I don't remember her real name.
I'll have to
But
look it up.
her. And then recently we did Grey's Anatomy, which is still going on. Believe it or
Wow.
not.
What? Well, that's crazy. Grey's Anatomy is still going, but also amazing that they're using such insane tech for their.
Yeah.
For
So
their
Grey's
show.
Anatomy is wild because they basically they have like, there's a studio in Hollywood that's like a fake hospital, and two shows filmed there. General Hospital, which is like 30 seasons or some crazy shit, or like 40 seasons, something insane, and Grey's Anatomy, which is also like 20 seasons. And those two shows basically leased this studio for like 20 years or some crazy shit like that. And it's like this crazy, huge building that every floor is like a different fake hospital thing. It's wild. It's
Right.
really wild. So we were really surprised when they came in to see the demo, because we're like, Grey's Anatomy, like they're like so old tech, like what do they need this for? And then it turned out that up until then, all their car process they were doing inside of this kind of fake hospital. They were clearing out one of the floors and doing like rear projection, like like super low end rear projection, but it was costing them the same amount of money that we quoted them for the Magic
Whoa.
Box.
Mm.
So now they're getting like 1.3 pixel pitch LEDs, um, driving up to their studio without them having to like do any manpower, anything. We come, we strike, we leave, and and the results speak for themselves. I mean, it was a very interesting production.
That's amazing. That's such a
That's
good case
great.
study, I feel like.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
really good case study. We actually in the 911, we actually had an episode where I don't know if I could say it. We had an episode where there was like a a two shot. So one was like at the driver, and then it was a driver looking out another car, and they had
Mm.
already shot the driver looking out of the other car and a rear projection, and then they came and shot the rest at us. And in the episode, they're cutting between rear projection, magic box, rear
That's
projection,
so
magic box,
funny.
and you could see it. It's like looks like crap. All of a sudden, looks really good. Looks like, and it was
Wow.
like that was the best case study
Thank
because
you
it's like
for
in
the
your
comparison video
yeah,
for our
exactly
website.
in the episode, it was like
Yeah.
you know, but it was really for sure that the final result kind of takes us back a little bit. The final result is better because of the quality of the panels, because of the way that we've set up the system. Um, but the real magic of Magic Box is the cost savings and the time savings. The way that, and this also comes back into a little bit of Touch Designer, the way that I built the system, and this would have only been available, would have only been possible with Touch Designer because of the fast prototyping. The way that we built the system is that you can set up your cameras in one configuration. So let's say like left, right, and center, like right shot, whatever, and then spin the car. We have a car and a turntable. Spin the car, and then the plates in the background spin as the car is spinning. Now, if you were doing a traditional system like Pixera or something, maybe you could build it in Pixera, maybe you could build it in Disguise. But what we would have to do is you'd have to take the 3 clips down, bring the 3 clips up, position them properly, make sure that they're, in the same timeline. And what we did was just a one button solution. Where is the car in this orientation? Is it this orientation? Is that orientation? Is it in the middle? Um, and that was something that really, like, you kind of think about it, but when the in production, in film, time is money. Everything needs to be fast. When the client, or when I should say the director, can come into the car in the morning, look at the plates with the car there, right? Look at the plates, select the plates, leave, come back an hour later, and everything's ready to shoot. That's something that they've never experienced before. In the past, they'd either have to do they'd have to do multiple different pre-lights, where they'd have to come, go back, bring the car in, take the car out, whatever it is, or they would do on a driving process rig, which is kind of like a car attached to a car, which obviously leaves a lot of error, can cause a lot of issues. It's not as safe. Um, and you don't know what you're actually going to film in the background, right? There could be some crazy person or somebody going like this or something.
Mm.
So there's a lot of benefits to the way that we do things, not only on the cost but also on this cost savings or time saving.
That is
Yeah, which is, it's
amazing.
so funny too, because in the film industry, you're right. It's like everything is money, but I also feel like the film industry somehow manages to make everything take 50 times longer.
Oh yeah, they
Like, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of nuance, obviously, but yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. I'm sure they were blown away by that. Like the first time you're getting directors, going and having that experience where it's like they're prepared for one thing and they get something totally unexpected.
totally.
I can only imagine that the amount of excitement people see when they're like, "Oh, we're cutting cost. Oh, wow, we're getting actually better results."
Dude,
That is
we
amazing.
drove up on the Fox lot, right, for this high potential shoot, and within like 30 minutes, like every UPN, which is like the unit production manager, which is like the guy that decides everything. He's like the god. Every UPN on the lot walked by and he's like, what is this trailer? Like, what the hell is going on here? Walked in, got their mind blown, and within that like, now it's holidays, but basically since we did that one shoot 4 months ago, we were booked on these car process shoots every other week, because it's like they see it, they get the quote, they don't understand, they call, they're like, why,
So
how?
it would be every week, but they just need 1 week to actually wrap their head around the fact
Yeah.
that this is real and they're not being scammed.
One show, which I can't mention, but one show actually wrote a whole scene, changed a whole scene to be a car process scene, just so they could use it because it was
Wow, that's
like
great.
beneficial to them. So yeah, I mean, it's like it's pretty crazy how the reaction of what is interesting is the reaction of the crews. So we did this Subaru commercial like half a year ago, and we pull up to like a parking lot, right? And open the truck, and like 10 other trucks are there as well. Like all these production trucks with lighting and camera, all the departments. And then everybody gets to the truck and they're like, wait a second, we can't really fit anything in here. And we also don't need anything in here. And like all these trucks are kind of like just standing around with all this equipment and they can't use. And we started getting this like this kind of vibe from all the units of like, are these guys going to take our jobs? You know,
Shit, yeah.
and it wasn't even that. It was actually, it wasn't even that because they're still going to be hired. It was more of like, we're ready for them to fail. Like, you know, we've
Right.
tried virtual production before. It doesn't work. And then we always have to come in and build a green screen and, you know, and call it a day.
Right.
So they brought all their stuff because they were ready for us to fail so that when we failed, they could just come in and save the day, you know? And it
Which
was
is
such an
that's
interesting thing.
Well,
and
I
such
want
a
to.
testament to the state of things as they are, right? Like I
Totally.
think that's the, you know, this stuff is all obviously, as we opened up the episode, it's like it's been around longer than most people probably realize, but like in terms of viability and accessibility and like success rate, you know, it's
Mhm.
only in recent years I feel like that it's really starting to pick up.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see this turning point because so many people, I'm sure, have had virtual productions fail. But I do, yeah,
Tons.
and so seeing that next step is incredible. And I do want to get into the future on where we think even maybe, you know, as we're entering into this phase that's becoming possibly a standard, where you maybe see the next steps being. But before we get there, I do want to ask you, because I know you run a great podcast, and I just wanted to kind of shine a little bit of light on that, because, you know,
Thank you.
especially if anybody is interested in anything we're talking about. I mean, this man throws a killer podcast on it where you're getting all the deets and all the information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
couldn't not
Mike,
give that a shout out.
yeah, Mike and Andrew are going to be on very soon. You
Hell
heard
yeah.
it here first. Yeah, the visual cast, please check it out if you like anything to do with visual art, with, you know, computational design, with generative art. I try to branch off into different types of visual art where we have stage designers on sometimes. I'm trying to get some lighting designers on now as well. And we have a lot of motion graphics artists on as well. So it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. I think where the visual cast kind of is different than what's available now is, and there are so many great podcasts out there that are in our sphere, you know, Sean Bowe's podcast, your guys' podcast, obviously. There's also the Bad and Ugly. What is it? No, it's called
I don't know if I know that one.
I've heard of it. I haven't listened to it
It's
though.
it's with those guys. They're really famous.
The Bad Studio,
The Bad Studio.
Bad
But
Decision,
yeah, Bad Studio, yeah.
Bad Decisions.
Bad
Yeah, Bad
Decisions. Yeah.
Shout out to them as well. They don't
They
need to
blew-
shout out
they
from
blew
us.
up
They
with
have like,
the,
you know, 500,000
had-
followers.
They had that Star Wars Unreal Engine thing, I think.
Yes.
That was kind of like their big they did like, was it Darth Maul or something? And
Something like that.
Unreal and,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Face,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
doing tons of stuff with Unreal. It's amazing.
Yeah, really great stuff. So, you know, I feel like there's a lot, but where I'm trying to differentiate myself, or where I feel like I'm differentiating myself, is we do a long form conversation, so it can be, you know, 2 hours, 3 hours. You know, obviously Joe Rogan is a very controversial figure at this point. He wasn't always so controversial, and unfortunately now he is. But the idea of just a unfiltered kind of conversation where there is interview elements to it, but the idea is to just kind of talk and kind of like hash things out and get deeper into things. And then the most unique part is where we do a thing called the set, where we basically allow the artist, or the guest, I should say, to show us their process, whether it's a audiovisual set, whether it's a behind the scenes look at some of their work, whether it's a tutorial, whether it's even just a showcase of their work and talking about their work while they're showing it to us. And that's been something that I think a lot of people are really benefiting from, where you get this kind of the guest also gets put into a position of like their flow. So their flow is kind of activated, and now they're not only in their conversational flow, they're also in their creation flow. And then, you know, the conversation after that is very interesting. We get into like esoteric places of like, you know, ideas and life and things like that, where they're much more open to kind of be in that place. So you get to kind of see your you know, your person who you maybe are inspired by, or look up to, in a different light. But also you get to learn something. You get to see something that you wouldn't have seen before. And really the guests have been so amazing with allowing that. I, this is something that I remember one of your guys' podcasts with a really awesome guest. Uh, I think his motion graphics Jesus, or no, what's his
David
Oh,
Ariev.
David Ariev.
David
Yeah.
David Ariev. Yeah,
Love that man. Great
I really
episode.
loved that episode.
So good.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
And it's something that I really feel is that, like, the motion graphics world, or I should say like the digital visual world, is so open with sharing. It's kind of like this ethos that has been very heavy in, like,
Yeah.
since the Andrew Kramer days, since we were kids and kind of like getting into it. I don't know where they got it from, but we got it from them. And like, it's continued, it's obviously changed. There's a lot of different ways that it's accessible, but I feel like anybody with a Patreon still has a free version of their Patreon, or
Yeah.
has a YouTube channel where they give things for free. And Octane Jesus, that's what his name was.
Octane
Yeah.
Jesus. Yes, of course.
So I feel like, there's like, that is kind of like the ethos that we're trying to do on the podcast as well, where it's like, look at this really high level artist showing you how he does something, or look at this really high level artist where he's performing for you, but then showing how he did the performance. And it's been great. I'm not really shooting or aiming for like the viral aspect of anything, which maybe is a mistake, but I just don't have it in me. But we're growing. We've got like 1,000 followers already, subscribers on YouTube, and I'm like, my goal is like every week to release a guest, so I'm keeping that traction. I'm on 47 this week.
Amazing.
So yeah,
congrats.
it feels really
Congrats.
good. And it just feels like it's getting better and better. And I can't, I don't want to say anything, but by the end of the year, there's going to be 3 super high profile guests. I
You're
just
looking
don't...
at 2 of them. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Yeah. 2 really high,
Yeah.
Oh my
Joke.
God, dude.
Yeah.
5 high profile guests.
Wait, 5. That's so good.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's so funny that you bring this up, because we were just at Camp MoGraph, which we've had some episodes about. You can go and, check out some of the conversations we had there, but that is 100% something that came up multiple times, which is the concept of, in the, in the ethos of this industry, it's always been about sharing. I mean, I didn't graduate college. I didn't go to school for this. YouTube University, or, Andrew Kramer, video co-pilot. But what I love about the format of your podcast too, is that, I think there's also the kind of dark side of that, is that so much of what that content that is produced now is, hey, I made the shot. Here's how you make this exact shot.
Right.
And you sort of start getting these, like, I feel like there are a lot of younger artists who, they can crank through like tons and tons of tutorials, but those tutorials aren't going to teach you, creative decision making. They're not going to teach you, how you bring, like, even, the work that you're doing, bring all these different pieces together and all these different elements together. If you're just searching, I don't know, fire text effect, After Effects, I mean, you can get tons of results, but like that, I think there is sort of a need right now for, the step beyond that, where it's like, if you're watching an artist do something in real time and talking about not just like the technical aspects, but, some of, like you said, some of the more esoteric aspects of it, and like why they're making those decisions, what motivates them.
Totally.
Those are, I think, where it's the ultimate goal for anyone, is to find their voice. And I think, that type of content is going to give you way more tools and way more perspective on how to do that.
That's such a great way of putting it, Andrew. Thank you. I mean, that's really the goal. Is like, the goal for me has always been to inspire, and it sounds so cliche, and like, I feel like such an asshole saying it, but like, really, like, inspiring other people is the most inspiring thing that you can ever achieve. I'm sure you
Absolutely.
guys know this from the Camp MoGraph as well. Like, it's the moment somebody, they don't even have to come to say to you, thank you for showing me something, but it's like, just that feeling that you kind of like made somebody, or give somebody a nudge, or like, seeing somebody using a process that I know that I taught them is like the best feeling ever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been the goal with the podcast. And like you said, really, like, there's always this very nervous thing from the guests of like, oh, I don't know what to show. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, dude, don't even think about it. Just open up Cinema, just open up, TouchDesigner. Let's just see what you do. Like, open up a project, and I'll ask you a million questions about things that will, gear you into a place of interest. And I always remind people that, like, anything you show is going to be interesting, because it's not like a tutorial. It's not like a thing scripted that you did. It's like anything you show is fun and interesting, even if it's just like, look at my extremely dirty node graph, or look at my, really messed up project file. But it's just how you do it is unique, and how you express it or explain it or clean it up in front of us is like interesting.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I
I
would imagine that your guests probably also glean something from that too, right? Like when
100%.
well, like, was it some, I don't know if it's actually an Einstein quote. I think it's attributed to him, but like if you can't explain something in however many sentences, you don't actually understand it. I'm
Right.
sure it probably opens up moments where you're like, oh, like having it in a conversational aspect where you're not trying to make this polished. It's got to be a 5-minute YouTube video. I've got the script. Here are the talking points.
Yeah.
When it becomes
Which
more
has its
conversational,
merit. It has its
right?
merit, right?
Of
Those things
course,
have its
yeah.
merit, but I think that the people that are searching maybe for, I'm sure you guys are the same. Like podcasts are on in the background while you're working. Like that's kind of like just a normal thing. And maybe sometimes the podcast that you want to listen to isn't a scientist or a comedian or something. It's somebody in your field that kind of like you can just drone out or kind of like have going on in the background. And I feel like when that's happening, you're just getting fed information that you don't even notice that's inspiring or teaching you something.
Hmm. I can't agree more. And I just want to also just parrot what everyone's been saying, but it truly is great feeling when an audience or somebody just comes up to you and says that they learned something that gave them an advantage in their field, or sometimes even got them a job. Oh man, when I hear that, that just makes it all
Best.
feel worth it. It's a
Totally.
great it's
Yeah,
such a great feeling.
for sure.
Well, because we're coming up at almost an hour here, I want to just kind
Wow.
of jump into,
Time
and guys,
flies.
again,
It
I
really
know it
does.
really does, especially when you're having a great conversation. Honestly, it's been such a good time.
Thank you, Mike.
But I want to jump into kind of just where you see virtual production going. Like, so, because I think right now our industry is moving so fast. Sometimes people say, is it even too late for me to jump in? For those who might be saying, hey, I want to jump in, what's the future of this field even looking like? Can you
Such a
maybe
good
just share
question.
some insights on where you think everything's heading?
It's tough, I obviously with the advent of AI, the word that should not be said, it's a tough one. I think that really, like, to me it's very clear that like real-time graphic engines are the future. I mean, it's already like happening now, but um it's a trend. You see it with Chaos, with V-Ray, with Vantage. They have this real-time kind of rendering engine that you can kind of use. Octane has been working on this real-time renderer forever. Um,
Ever.
forever.
Eevee and
We're
Blender.
just
I
gonna
got
put an
Eevee and
echo
Got to give
Blender,
effect.
Blender a shout out.
100%.
Yeah.
Blender all day. So I think that learning kind of what is a real-time rendering engine, how do they work, what are the nuances, what are the pros and cons of them, Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, whatever, is very important. It doesn't necessarily have to be game design per se. It could also just be like, how is, what is a, now I can't even think of the thing, but like, how is Lumen working with like, with the fucking proxies? How is Eevee working with their global illumination and their type of version of proxies? Like, just understanding a little bit more about real-time rendering versus like, the path tracing, which is very simple paths just shooting everywhere, I think is very beneficial, because I think that even if AI, or I should say, when AI eventually kind of branches out into these places, those technologies are not going anywhere, and they're just going to be built upon, because they're so integrated into the industry and into the workflows and the way everything works, but also because they're really good technologies. And you know, AI. Actually, this is a good time to shout out our mutual friend, Dot Simulate Lyle, who introduced
Oh
us,
yeah,
because
Mr.
he is
Lyle
like
Hintz.
Mr. Lyle Hint. He is on the forefront of real time AI, but it's it doesn't do what it needs to do yet. It will probably, or it will in some way. Um, what I will say about that is, I think that really where AI benefits, and where I get a lot of benefit from AI, is from learning, from teaching myself new skills, learning about coding and about engineering and software design. You can really become a entry level coder within a few days. It's absolutely insane. And those skills are going to be skills that will translate into art 100%. Because, you know, as a touch designer user, I was like, oh, I never need to know how to code. The whole point of Touch Designer is that you can code without coding. But then when I started coding in Touch Designer and I taught myself Python, I'm like, oh shit, like I
Yeah.
can do things way better and way faster. And I think that's gonna kind of be the future, where it's like you still don't need to know how to code. You just need to know what to look for, how to ask it, where to put the code, where to run it, kind of thing. Um, and I think that that's really where it shines, is like kind of like where you can elevate your processes or make them more faster, more robust, and more kind of like all over the place and not just in one place. I think is really where it's going to go. Yeah, and with virtual production, I mean, it's kind of, I'm banking on that it's going to be the future, obviously, because I'm in this company and I put a lot of myself into it. But it's anybody's guess. I mean, it's what's definitely a trend that we were seeing is the very big studios, the ones that were built during COVID, the ones that did Mandalorian and do all the shows, they're all closing down because they're too big. And this is something that the CEO, my CEO Brian, really figured out early on. Is like, okay, let's not build something big. Let's build it smaller and mobile, because that's what is going to sustain or maintain, last
Yeah.
longest.
And modular, right? Because it sounds
And
like I mean, the fact that you're able to service so many different aspects of production.
Totally. Totally. So I think, yeah, I don't think that virtual production is in any way going anywhere. I think that, as we said before, it's been around for such a long time. It's just evolved. I think if you're interested in film and you're a little bit nerdy, a little bit maybe digital arty, virtual production is a great thing to learn. Unreal is a great thing to learn. And if you're not film inclined and you're just interested in kind of like the more nerdy digital thing, then any kind of real-time rendering, any type of generative art that is kind of like you know non-destructive, procedural, Houdini-esque kind of thing, touch designer-esque, I think is a really good skill to learn.
I absolutely love it, and I couldn't agree more. I really do, and I think virtual production is definitely a very fascinating type of technology that, having these sets come up, because we're always going to be wanting the actors involved, again,
Hopefully.
having the reflections. Yeah, I mean, it's just
Have you seen that what Joshua posted a few days ago or like a week ago, his
Was
digital avatar?
No, but I did
Yasha
see it. I
Seuss?
saw
I've
a
seen a
fake
lot
Tom
of
Cruise Mission Impossible trailer, and it's
There's
good. I mean,
some
it's
dude,
wild.
you could like one picture and he just types in the words and it looks exactly like him talking video, like,
Yeah.
obviously it's so far away from like a Hollywood production, but like,
yeah.
Or did you
I
anybody.
feel
see
like one thing
there
that always comes in, though, is that, if, as especially having all those people on set, is that perfection is
It's
key.
magic.
And yeah,
There's a
and
magic
you're
that
always going
happens.
to be, I always find it funny with AI. I've talked about this before, but you wind up needing to control so much of your
Totally.
image that you wind up going back to the
And doing this.
original programs because you need to be able to change it. Like,
Totally.
can you move that box further in the
Nope, you
background, that
can't.
well, yeah,
element
and
closer?
and
And
that's
Nope.
like
even
the
if
whole
you can, it's like, okay, well, now a little bit. Okay, well, now I need like 50 different controllers to make this go directly. Particles. I mean, Jesus, we talk about how many times you heard
I also think it's
people.
reaching
Yeah.
a plateau. I don't think that the companies are being very honest with us. I think that there's a lot of money being thrown around, and that they're reaching either a plateau or some sort of, like Moore's Law ish kind of area where it's like going to stall or just kind of be stuck.
Well,
Oh,
the
it
thing that
is.
the thing that kind of catches me too is like all the EAC, like accelerationists, whatever they're going by now. Their whole end game is basically, we're gonna make computers think for us. And I think a lot of people, especially if you're in a creative field, like that's not. I don't know. I don't really find that appealing. I don't want to be. I want to still think about stuff. I want to still assess problems and come up with solutions,
For
or
sure.
have ideas and try to implement them.
You want it
And
to
I
be
think,
easier.
yeah, easier, 100%. It's like the kind of trope since the first version of ChatGPT or whatever,
Right.
when people were just like, when am I going to get my rotoscoping AI? Like, that's all I
Right.
want.
Right.
I just like,
Right.
don't
Right.
ever make me hand roto something again. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's also interesting because having been so having it been such like a rapid sort of in your face, suddenly we have AI, right? Which now we're realizing there are varying degrees of, I think that we haven't even hit the point where the marketplace will probably start to dictate some of what actually gets built, because people are starting to weigh on like, these are the things that help. You mentioned learning. One of our guests, Eating Liu, I always think about what she says, which is like, I use ChatGPT as a tutor. Like I tell that I type into ChatGPT, I'm learning this new thing, quiz me on this, I'm not going to just copy and paste whatever it spits out at me and put it, because at that point I'm not learning, I'm not growing. And,
by the way,
it's such a
just
great place
for the LLMs, if anybody is not using Claude.ai, it's insane. Like
that's
for
open
coding
source too, right?
it's open source. I mean, it's still there is a pro version, but it is open source. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's fucking insane, the amount of like the difference between writing code on 4.0 and ChatGPT versus Claude Sonnet is like,
wow.
Like,
Yeah.
absolutely
I've heard that
insane.
I keep hearing that, and I'm excited to try it. I do
It's
want to
so
also
good.
mention that, and this will be maybe my last thought, talking about AI in particular, maybe hitting a little bit of a roof, is that I just find it so funny because a lot of people are speculating that it's not actually getting better. And you're seeing, some of these companies are now divulging into smaller models that are kind of just doing the same thing that kind of
But
seems to be the
focused.
trend.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I've watched so many Sam Altman interviews, and all of a sudden he went from just a few months ago to last year saying, oh, AGI is 7 to 8 years away, to now he's like, oh, it's only a few months away. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really? Like, it's so weird that you're hearing this news, like AI is kind of hit its limit. And now he's like, nope,
Also,
we have something coming that's bigger. It's like,
conveniently
do you
overlooks
though? Or is this just
overlooks resource issues.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole thing was like, I got to build $8 trillion of data centers, which is like,
It's just,
okay, your next question is, where are you going to get all the lithium?
right.
Where are you going to
and Microsoft got their power plants that are now no longer able to be and go back into production. So it's kind of you need to restart nuclear, which is just kind of
and even if you do, like,
a lot of problems here.
I don't think it's just a power thing. Like, you can't, like, AGI is such a crazy thing. Like, you look at the language models now, they're just language models. They're not artificial. They're not intelligent. They're really amazing and it's super like science fiction-y, but they're not intelligent in the sense of like, they only know what they know. And an AGI is so different than that, and obviously we're like so not we're not qualified to be talking about this really, but like just in in science fiction terms, like I was just watching the show Pantheon. Have you guys ever seen it?
I haven't seen Pantheon.
Oh,
highly recommend it.
I've been
it's a UI, right? It's uploaded intelligence, and I don't know. I just been thinking about it a lot because it's a visceral show. It like really makes you feel like whoa. But like the idea that human intelligence is so quantifiable, and it's so easy to quantify it is just stupid. Like, why would anybody believe that to be like a thing? Like, we're so much more than just like neurons firing, and like there's so much more involved there. And intelligence is not just your brain; it's emotions. It's like it's your experience. It's like there's so much things there that I feel like it's so it's such like a little bit of a snake oil kind of thing going on, where like I think that the intentions were really good of like, let's release this tool to the world, and then they're like, here's $5 billion because we think you're going to make AGI, and then they're like, yeah, it's really good, I think it's like they're kind of chasing their tails a little bit, which is.
And speaking of this new report that came out, OpenAI, you said the magic number, lost $5 billion so far this year. $5 billion. I don't know how that profit model works.
How is even? It's so crazy.
I mean, I think at one point, I mean, I don't know if the stats
AGI is coming next year. That's how it's working right now.
I feel like there are stats out there that are definitely like, especially when ChatGPT first kind of launched, and it's like they were obviously just trying to get users on the platform. Every query cost X amount of dollars in processing, cooling,
For sure.
overhead.
hasn't
And it's like,
changed.
yeah,
I think
I
it's
don't
even
think much
worse
has
now.
changed.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, damn.
That's why I like Claude, because they're very upfront about these things and they're actually turning a profit. There is a downside. They do block you at a certain amount, like, every day, like you have a certain amount of tokens you can use, which
Might
kind
be
of gets
kind of
annoying.
healthy, honestly. Maybe,
I was just going to say, there is something to it where I'm like rapid, taking a break. Or instead of
Yeah.
being rapid, I'm kind of like, I'm forced to try things myself before I prompt, which is also like
Mhm.
a really healthy thing to do, because then I'm learning more and more. Yeah, I can't get over a cloud. It's
Yeah,
so
it's like
good.
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, right? You have to take the minute to be like, what am I actually trying to do here? What parts do I feel confident in? And then what am I going to query because I only have so many
Yeah.
tokens?
Well, I'm going to say one last thing, and then we're going to wrap up this episode and continue it with maybe any of these ideas or any
Yeah, just
questions you guys want us to talk about
tune in
on
for part 2.
Alan's part. Yeah, but no, my last thing is I think they need to have an ethics division in the US government on all of this. That is just
100%.
they talk to CEOs, they kind of develop the emotional state of where we're all at and do like they did with the nuclear
Yeah,
handshake deal,
yeah,
where all the countries kind of come together and determine where we think this should be capped at in certain
totally agree with you.
areas. So,
I hope
um,
that the current administration, obviously we love it very much. It's a great administration, the best administration that's ever happened to the America. Hopefully they'll take care of that.
please don't hurt us.
Yeah, exactly. We love you.
And we love everyone who's listening.
Every
Well, with that
course.
being said, Alan, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up? And where can people
Um,
find you?
no, thanks so much for having me, guys. Really, the podcast scene, you guys are you started way before me, and I just look up to you guys in a very
Yeah.
strong way. And the content that you guys are making for a long time, and the XR camp, MoGraph camp is really awesome. I really hope I'll be in New York sometime to be able to come to one of your meetings. If anybody's in New York, go to their meetings. I see the pictures from them every time, and it looks amazing. Um, you can find me at youtube.com at the visual cast is the podcast, or on Instagram, at the visual cast. And my socials for my visual project is at Rem Visual Art all over, or remvisuals.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Alan, for being on. This was a blast.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.